My name is Caleb Weidman, and today, wait, that's not right. My name is Zach Snyder, and today we're going to talk about one of the most important and vital parts of a healthy and thriving ministry. Any guesses? No? Well, if for some reason you didn't read the title of this video and just wanted to click on the thumbnail in my face, today we're going to be talking about volunteers, how to lead them, how to develop them, and how to keep them. Welcome to Blackbar. So chances are, if you're watching this video, then you're in a role in the church or at a nonprofit where you're leading volunteers on a weekend or throughout the week. You've learned in one capacity or another that leading and being a part of a ministry is a lot of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual investment. Week in and week out, you're dealing with people, stressors, the weight of the impending weekend, expectations of leadership. You're dealing with the fact that you just got the sermon notes 5 minutes before service, and the list goes on and on. The reality is that life doesn't stop when ministry begins, which means ministry can be messy. With that in mind, I want to start right out the bat by saying that this video isn't going to fix your volunteer crisis, it isn't going to make volunteers appear out of thin air, and it isn't going to resolve all the issues behind the scenes. You feel better yet? So naturally, starting a video talking about volunteers, it would make sense to start out right out the bat discussing volunteers, right? Well, I'm not going to do that. I want to start out this video by talking about you and about me. So when we understand how we as leaders tick, then we can understand that God has made us that way for a very important reason. Through understanding ourselves, we can then understand the people around us in a greater way. It's so important that we're intentional about this kind of stuff because not only are we leading volunteers on the weekend, being the example, but also we've been entrusted by our leadership and by God to lead these people well. So how do we understand ourselves? Well, I'll be the specimen here. So when I get criticized or rejected, or maybe I fail to accomplish a task that I was assigned to by someone, it's really easy for me to take that personally, and then me taking that personally really stresses me and drains me emotionally. When I'm under that stress that's oftentimes self-imposed, I tend to turn that around and I can be controlling or overbearing or authoritarian in the teams around me. And that can translate directly and impact the people that I'm serving with. I don't want what I'm feeling to negatively impact the people that I'm with or the ministry I'm a part of. So for me, it's vitally important that I have those self-awareness so that I can recognize when those stresses are happening. So I need to make sure that I prioritize that as an important part of my growth. While I can't recommend the Enneagram enough, there's a myriad of self-assessment softwares and programs out there that can help you understand yourself better. And if personality assessments aren't your thing, then I highly recommend talk to a close personal friend or a leader that has influence in your life. If you truly want to see the best in yourself and the best in your team, go in with an open mind and don't be afraid to ask some tough questions. Just know that when we become healthier, our team becomes healthier and our ministry becomes healthier. So after understanding ourselves, the next important piece is to set healthy boundaries. Ministry reaches deep into all aspects of your life. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but especially when you're in leadership, it's easy for boundaries to become unclear or blurred. If you're in full-time ministry, that's your vocational fulfillment, your emotional connection, your spiritual fulfillment, your relational hub, your pastoral connection, your personal outlet, the list goes on and on. When your ministry inevitably causes stress, you need to make sure that you have boundaries in place so that you can fall back and take time to spend time refilling on the correct source. Spoiler, that source is God. Creativity, ministry, relationships, even serving are all limited wells of energy when they lack connection to the source. And eventually, they're gonna fail you. It's when you get connected to God that you can really start to establish and understand what clear and healthy boundaries look like. They look like blocking out time so that you're not constantly available to whoever needs you, prioritizing time for your spouse or for your kids, protecting the Sabbath day each week. If you don't have one, get one. Even put your phone down. Ministry is so important, but if you don't create boundaries, then you're destined for burnout. So now that you've prayed and hopefully are constantly praying, a good next step is to develop a vision for your team. Good vision should be right out in front, but I understand the reality is that sometimes good vision is lacking. Now, it's not that someone should be blamed for an absence of vision. Rather, I'd say the reality of what we do as church creatives is dictating and assessing how our unique fields can best and most effectively align with the visions of our ministries. And that, I'll propose, could very well be an interpretation of each one of our callings. And I think that calling and vision very clearly relate. Be it marketing, production, worship, whatever it looks like, we are in a field that is constantly growing and constantly evolving alongside the culture that we're in. And it's for that reason that sometimes the roles we're put in require a constant awareness of why what we do matters. Clear vision, inspired by our calling, determines the direction our ministry is heading. If you don't already know the vision of your church, find it out. From there, understand how your ministry can best align with the overall vision of your church. Then, when we bring others on board that calling, a clear vision can help them also understand and adapt to that road ahead. It's really important to establish clear structure and job descriptions for every single position on your team. Creating an organization chart or a needs chart could also be a valuable way for you to start this process. Starting from the top dog all the way down to the brand new volunteer, what are the roles that they have? What is the expectation for those positions? And what could they become? Even if you don't have the personnel now, think about what it could be. When your volunteers and team leaders can clearly understand the vision, then they can be unified in the goal that's ahead for your ministry. So to recap all that, calling leads to vision, vision leads to clarity, clarity leads to unity. So now that we're halfway through this video, let's segue into the real reason you clicked on this video, volunteer recruitment. Make sure you start this process with prayer. I can't say that in enough ways. Pray that God will bring the right people to your teams. Pray that God brings you peace and patience as you're waiting for these people. As you pray, understand why you're recruiting in the first place. Yes, you have a need on the team, but you're not just fulfilling a role, you could be helping someone fulfill a calling. Now let's look at some valid recruiting options, many of which I've used at my own church. You could do a sermon series on the importance of volunteering. You could have a volunteer celebration day with signups in the lobby after service. Your life track or growth track or connection track, whatever track it is that connects new people to your church, could have a volunteer component at the end of that. You could host a ministry fair, inviting people into the tech booth or onto the worship stage or into the photography room. You could offer internships where people could learn more about the skills that they'd like to get involved in. You could push volunteer signups on social media, or even you could release merchandise that's exclusive to the volunteer teams. All these things are recruitment methods that could potentially help you. We've seen some of these things work well, but by far, the best recruitment method that I've seen and heard in action work well is, drum roll to hear the combined sigh of all the introverts out there, recruiting through personal connection, conversation, and relationships. I know, took our personality assessments, you're an introvert, you don't like to talk to people, but it's proven to be the most effective method to bringing new people into your ministry. I was taught that every 1 in 4 people will say yes to volunteer if you just ask them. Not every single person that you ask is going to be an automatic home run, and that's okay, but it is important to say that just because they say no, don't just cut off the relationship and move on to the next person. You'd be surprised at what seeds you plant now for volunteering could yield a couple months, years down the line. But rejection aside, something that you should never ever do is say someone's no for them. It's not at all bad to try and protect someone. In fact, that's kind of my default. But the important thing is that you give the person the chance to recognize how their skills can be used in a larger capacity. And if you say a no for someone just because they've got kind of a busy life, you could be taking away from another ministry and you could be robbing from their calling. Sometimes people just need to be asked and shown that they have a place in the church. Whatever the case, just treat this person as a person. Time is one of the most valuable resources. And what you're asking people to do when they volunteer is to literally give up their time on their own volition. Now, I know you don't want me to say this because I don't know if I want me to say this, but an important part of healthy ministry, of not taking for granted your people, is to give intentional time off. And that includes you and me taking some time off ourselves. Believe me, I understand the pain. You may not feel like you have enough people to run even this weekend's tech service. You can't give people time off because you literally can't cover the positions that you have. But also, you can't afford not to give people time off. I can think of at least one volunteer right now that works 40+ hours at a non-ministry job, has multiple kids, is married, each of those kids has extracurricular activities, and he still comes in and serves every other week 6 hours on the ministry team. Now, he doesn't have to do that, but he's decided to make this time commitment to invest into what God's doing in this community and how God can use his skills in a unique and full way. It's my responsibility as his friend and as his leader to not take that for granted. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a volunteer that wants to serve every single service, every single weekend, and wants to learn every position. Hang on to them, by the way. But if you establish the intentional habit of giving them at least one service off a month, that's not only going to help them develop healthy disciplines, that's also going to help you and me learn how to lead better. Especially for people that are married or that have kids, it's so vital to give them a chance to worship together, to hear the message together, to be able to connect with married couples and families. That's a vital part of church. And while we can provide some of that in the ministry, that shouldn't be the only source that they're getting as a family. A core leadership value that I think is important to talk about in this part of the conversation is something that I've talked a little bit about before. It's this idea of health over growth. Imagine you have a baby and you want this baby to grow, right? There's a little Chewbacca. The thing is, you can't just take this child, set it down, and yell at it until it grows. That's not how it works. What you have to do instead is you've got to create a healthy atmosphere for it. You've got to feed it, you've got to water it, you've got to take care of it, you've got to clean it, you've got to teach it, you've got to put it in an atmosphere where it has the chance to grow and thrive in the way that it needs to. Volunteer ministry is the same way. If you establish healthy guidelines and develop clear culture that emphasizes the importance of individual health, the natural result of that will be a healthy team. The natural result of a healthy team is healthy growth. Now, a big part of healthy teams is healthy relationships. Relationships are probably one of the biggest components of a successful ministry. Relationships are what help us to feel like we belong to something. Healthy, passionate, relation-centric ministries are going to be most attractive to new people. Alongside relationships, creatives have a chance to add value to others through skills and skill sets. Creatives are known for our ability to pick up things quickly, and when we don't know the answer to something, we'll pretty easily Google it and find out. But the caution here is when you're leading a team of like-minded creatives, don't just stop at learning your own personal skill sets. Each of us learn a little bit differently, so be patient, be intentional, and learn how to extend grace. If you're like me, perfectionism, quality, and excellence are things that are very high on my priority scale. So there's a very real tension and perfectly understandable caution that comes with training up someone who's either inexperienced or brand new in a skill set. But don't let that stop you from handing off tasks. May not want to hear this, but at the end of the day, you cannot run the entire ministry by yourself. Especially if your church grows, there's no way that you can, in a healthy way, sustain the quality and excellence that I think you and I both know that we strive for. When it comes to volunteers, don't be afraid to let a few mistakes slide. If you need to step in, you need to step in. That's what a producer role's for. But don't suffocate or railroad your volunteers. That's a quick way to discourage them. See more in your volunteers than they see in themselves, and don't be afraid to fail forwards. Don't feel like you're sacrificing quality just because you're growing. Growth and training are compatible. In our interview with Dan DeRogers a few episodes back on the Blackbar podcast, he summarizes my point pretty well.
Bring someone along with you. Pour into someone. Treat them as if they know something. Don't just have like a Tonto, like it's not, you're not the Lone Ranger. Like people always say, like, work yourself out of a job. Yeah, I mean, it's not about you having to step down because someone else takes your place. Sure. It's about bringing someone else into the thrill that is serving God using the gifts that he's given us. Pour into someone, like make that a habit. Pour into someone's. We should all be in this habit of training and bringing other people along, and it's not a threat to us. It's actually showing your maturity in your industry by having the confidence to teach someone everything you know.
The Bible talks so much about legacy. What greater legacy could you leave than building up an entire team of people with brand new skill sets that can help grow and step into their creative callings? Whew, we covered a lot today. But before you click off this video and start your daily TikTok binge, I want to leave you with this. Leading volunteers week in and week out is a lot of work. Growing yourself takes time. Not having enough volunteers to run a full production is discouraging. And serving every single service, every single weekend is exhausting. Believe me, I get it. Please know that you're not alone in this. And I hope you also know that what you do is important and what you do matters. I believe wholeheartedly that you're where you are for a reason. I'll leave you with this challenge. You have the opportunity right now to impact and influence every single volunteer you serve alongside of every single weekend. So regardless if leading the ministry that you're leading is a temporary assignment, a short-term commitment, or a long-term calling, don't miss out on what God wants to do through you, through your ministry, and through your volunteers on this weekend and every weekend to come. There's a lot I didn't get to go over in this video today, so make sure to join us this Wednesday for the Blackbar podcast. Also, make sure to join our Discord community to meet other church creatives and media people working together to make each other better. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.